Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's Workshop. So here we are with that broken bed frame that was left over from the broken bundle of furniture that I got for $15. And I'll make sure I leave the link in the description for that video. But I just couldn't resist. This bed frame really looked like a bookshelf to me. And I kind of put off this project for a while because I really didn't think I had anywhere to put it until I realized I had a blank wall in the Dress Shop Dollhouse office that really needed to be anchored. So I'm just playing around here to see if some of the books that I have will fit. Now, these shelves were not originally designed to be shelves. Again, this was a bed frame. Now, the shelf areas are high enough for my 12 scale dollhouse books, but the part for the shelves is for the books to sit on is really shallow. So I need to add some depth to the bookshelf so that things will look natural. But overall, I really like it. I like the color. I do need to cover up some of the damaged parts. So let me show you what I was thinking. Now, this big area here really didn't have anything here. And I think a nice substantial shelf like this will really anchor the space. But I felt like it was kind of low, so I'm thinking about adding some legs to it to give it a little bit more height and make it look a little bit grander and more substantial. Now here I'm just kind of holding it up on the wall, trying to consider whether I want to mount it to the wall or just add legs to make it higher. And yeah, I really don't like the idea of mounting it to the wall. That I think adding some cool legs will really do the trick. So let me get back to my table and see what I can come up with. So dolls, here I am again. I pulled out all of my scraps and I left a few of the books on the shelf so it would guide me as to how much I needed to add to give the shelves the proper amount of depth. Now I had a bag of square dolls of all different shapes and sizes. Some of them were basswood, some of them were balsa. So I just used them based on the size of the area that I was trying to deepen. So I put a piece along the edge, and I know I need to add pieces to extend the shelves themselves. But I started with the outside to kind of make my base or add a like almost like a perimeter or a frame around the part that I was making deeper. And I cut the pieces to the same length of the shelf. Now again, dolls, I didn't do a lot of measuring. I just cut it the same length as the existing shelf. And after I added the two side pieces, I added some similar pieces across the top and the bottom of the outer frame. Now, after I got the outer frame together, I started to consider using different types of molding to finish it off, but some of the pieces that I originally played with seemed kind of modern. After I really looked at it, I realized trying to decorate it was premature because I really needed to deal with those damaged outer edges. After digging through my supplies, I found some wood strips, and they were the perfect width for that part of the outside of the bookshelf that I needed to cover the damage on. Now, dolls, after I added an ample amount of Gorilla Wood glue, I taped it down in order for it to dry flat in addition to clamping it. Now, dolls, it would be a best practice to use painter's tape or masking tape. I use Scotch tape. It is not advisable. After I used the strips to do the side and they were dry, I went on to do the top and the bottom part of the bookshelf. Now, I did it separately because I wanted to make sure those areas were nice and flat. Sometimes, if you try to do too many things at one time, you'll get distracted by trying to get done too quickly and you'll miss things that you didn't anticipate. So I really liked the way the sides came out, so I used the same piece of wood and covered the area, but I did allow it to extend a little bit past the body of the shelf. I felt like extending it a little bit will really finish off the top and help when I get ready to enhance it. So after I marked the wood, I went on and cut through the piece so that I could finish the top of the bookshelf. And after I cut it, I did take a moment to sand it a little bit to make sure that it wouldn't give me any splinters, but I did just smooth off the edges. I didn't bevel it yet. Now, originally I was going to make the topper piece longer than the one I use at the bottom, but then I decided I wanted to make both of the pieces the same length and make them sort of like parallel at the top and bottom. Now, dolls, I went on to go ahead and cut the other piece. Now, it is not a good practice to use the previous piece as your measuring tool for the secondary piece, but I was feeling really happy because I have a new cutting board, so I call myself using the lines on the cutting board to keep me in check, and it turned out okay. The two pieces ended up being about the right length. Although I'm grateful that the two pieces came out the proper length for my project, definitely don't practice that, dolls. Measure each piece separately. Now, I did add an ample amount of the Gorilla Wood glue to create a nice seamless seal between the old wood and the new wood. Now, when you're doing a project like this where you're trying to cover or camouflage some damaged parts, I feel like you definitely have to take a little extra time and care just to kind of make sure the piece doesn't look, for lack of a better word, homemade. Now, this is not a typical dollhouse piece. It is my original design for all intents and purposes, but I wanted to look as realistic and natural in the space as possible. So I did clamp that down to make sure it dried securely. Now here I am spreading the glue for the bottom piece, which is the same size, and making sure it went end to end. And I allowed it to dry overnight so that I would make sure that everything was good and solid. Now, before I allowed it to dry, I did play around with the idea of the legs. Now, these are sort of like some Cabriole legs that I had. I bought them, just a bundle of them off of one of the websites, and I pulled out all of my trims in consideration of how I would finish the piece in the end. So at this part, I'm literally pulling out all of my idea concepts, getting them all together. I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use, but I want everything to be available when I start to do my add-ons and my finishing touches. I even pulled out the nail art dolls. Now here I'm just showing you how nice and neat that corner turned out. And this is the back of the bookshelf. You can tell it used to be a bed frame. And here I am adding the little cabriole legs. Now, I struggled a little bit about this part because I was wondering if I was turning the legs the right way, but it's kind of a little different because they're normally used for the front of like Chippendale style chairs, but it didn't matter, dolls. It was my own design, so I put the legs on in the direction that I felt comfortable and allowed it to dry. Because at this point, this is a Little Gretchen's Workshop salvaged original. Now, after I got the legs on and looked at them, they didn't look bad. I was concerned about the direction, but like I said, it didn't look unnatural, so I was comfortable with it. So I allowed my piece to dry upside down to make sure it didn't disturb the legs while they were drying. And I think the overall piece really turned out to be exactly what I wanted. And after it dried, I took it back to the Dress Shop office, and I think it really, really anchors that wall. It's a substantial piece. I really think having the bookcase on the opposite side of the room really balances things out, and it makes the room look a lot more grand. But more than anything, I'm tickled that it doesn't look like a bed anymore. Now, after I added the initial borders, I did go back to the top and the bottom and add an additional piece of trim, which was just an additional piece of those square wooden dolls that I used in the beginning. And I want you to take note, although I didn't show it, I did stain the entire piece with my Jacobean stain. And there is a contrast between the pieces that I added and the original red mahogany look, but I really like it because I think that makes it look even more antique. So after I was done with the legs and the main structure of the bookcase, I felt like it needed something decorative, and I had been saving these little triangle filigree pieces for the longest time and wanted to use them on a large piece of furniture. Now, many times you see these type of metal triangles on the corners of jewelry boxes and things to protect the edges of the corners. But today I'm going to use those little triangle pieces to enhance my otherwise plain bookshelf. At this point, I'm really starting to get excited thinking about the books on the shelves and all the different things I'm going to add to really, really bring this bookshelf to life. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to each and every one of my dolls, whether you've been with me from the beginning or whether you're watching for the very first time. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. I'm so excited because I have so much in store for you dolls, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye bye now, dolls.